Hello everyone, welcome back to the Pushing Horizon podcast. This is your host Ash. On this podcast, we don't chase platitude, we chase truth, one foot strike at a time. Today's guest is Tom, a man who has just not run marathon in all 7 continents, but who has also run through more than most people can fathom. Abuse, homelessness, loss, grief, yet he kept moving. And now, he's running in the places most of us are told to avoid. This episode isn't just about medals or mileages, it's about survival, defiance, and the connections. So let's get right into it and let me introduce to our guest today. Hey Tom.
Hello, how are you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you so much for coming here and giving this platform the opportunity to talk about you and your running journey and everything. I have only known you briefly, so can you please give a quick introduction about you so everybody knows who
Tom Leddy, and I've been running for, at this point, over 20 years. I've run the half marathon in all 50 U.S. states and on all 7 continents. And then also mixed in with that is a large number of marathons as well. And I've also published 5 books about running, working on book number 6, which is going to be about my experiences of running in places that are on the U.S. State Department's travel advisory list, right? So I know we're going to be talking about some of that in a little bit.
That's scary though, isn't it? Because it's for a reason that we're not supposed to reason. But how do you feel when you run in those places that State Department says don't do it?
It's funny because it's not, almost every time I've gone to a place like this, it's never been as bad as what the media makes it out to be. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm doing it, because in addition to just going and running in these places, what I'm trying to do is meet up with other local runners or even just local people that live in some of these places. And the idea is that what I want to show is that despite any cultural differences, political differences, whatever differences there are in the world, which there seems to be a big focus on lately, I want to show that despite all of that, anybody in the world can get along just fine if you can find something that you have in common. And running, really any kind of sport, but running in particular, because it's my sport, is just kind of a good way to do that, a good way to connect with people.
That's really said. And we do not have a lot of things in common. And I think that's a nice way to show people that it's okay. And I think living in the US, I've been in the US for so long too. I think there is just some misinterpretation and the misconceptions sometimes that if somebody says something and then they always, instead of finding out the truth, then it's like propaganda. All right. You said running became your escape with your rough childhood. Can you take us back onto one of those early runs? What did it give to you when nothing else was helping?
Yeah, first I have to maybe give you a little bit of my background. And you said a little bit in the intro, but to give you a little bit more details. When I was about 18 months old, my parents split up. And then for the next few years after that, my mom and I were essentially homeless. We kind of went back and forth where we'd stay with some friends or relatives for a little while. And then we didn't have a place to stay. We'd just sleep in our car because we didn't have anywhere else to go. Eventually, we ended up living in Chicago and growing up in Chicago because it was the first place where my mom was able to find a job that paid enough for us both to have our own place. And then we kind of went from there. She got a better job and we moved into a nicer apartment in a nicer neighborhood. Eventually we got a house, but she started dating a guy who became very abusive. There was about 6 years of time when I was growing up where both my mom and I were being physically abused pretty bad. And then after my mom finally was able to kick him out of our house, it took a while and that took a major toll on her health. After everything ended, even though the guy was gone, now we have our own house. We're living in a lot nicer neighborhood than we were when I was growing up. My mom was starting to get sick and she passed away pretty early on when I was pretty young. And right around the time when she was getting really sick and I was kind of helping her, she had some heart conditions, I started running. But the funny thing is, I was not a very good runner in the beginning. This was right after college. I got my first big job and I had this boss, his name was John, and we're still friends to this day, even though now it's been over 20 years, but he was really into fitness. He would go out every day at lunch. He would run a 5K and then he would take a shower, get something to eat, and still be back at his desk within an hour. One day he asked me to come with him and join him. I said yes, but it wasn't really because I wanted to be a runner. It was more because it was my first big job and he was my boss and I wanted to be a good employee and impress my boss and say, yeah, of course I'm going to go run with you. And John and then this other friend that we have named Frank, who's, like I said, the 3 of us are still friends, but we went for a run. And the first time I tried to run, I think I ran maybe a block and I had to stop and catch my breath and I'm breathing. And kind of annoyed me that I'm still only in like my early 20s at this point. And I feel like I should be able to do more than this. And I went back, and the nice thing was my friends that I was running with kind of were like, just do what you can. You don't have to keep up with us. We've been doing this for a long time. Just come out, run, and when you need to walk, go ahead and walk, and then it's fine. What I started doing was every day I would go out and I would, for something that was a little bit further in the distance, I would basically just say, today I'm going to run to the stop sign that's down at the end of that road, right? And then maybe the next day there's a fire hydrant that's a little bit further down than the stop sign. And I didn't care how far it was. It was just, I want to make it a little bit further. And what I started to realize at the time was every time I was running, I was just focusing on that goal. Like, I need to make it to this thing. And I would completely clear my head. All I cared about was my run that day. It was almost like the equivalent of meditation for me, where it was like, I would do it and I would run. And even though I wasn't even running that far yet, I felt so good. It was like I was proving to myself that I could do these things. And then I was clearing my head, and then I felt great afterwards. When I look back now, something that I realized looking back on it that I didn't realize at the time was that I still had a lot of trauma that I was dealing with in my head that I didn't realize I was dealing with at the time. And that was just kind of helping me. And I got such a nice dopamine rush from running that I kind of became addicted to it. And then eventually I got to a point where I could run that same 5K with my boss. And then I found an actual 5K race to sign up for because I was, well, now I'm running the same distance every day. It felt great to do the race, and there's people at the finish line and everything. And then from there, I just started looking for longer races and in different places around the country at first, and then eventually kind of expanding out around the world. That's how everything got started, and how running in a lot of ways was kind of a healing experience for me, and still I would say is to this day.
Yeah, it is. And you said, I think it is one of the reasons perhaps the early runner who is a new runner quits, because it's hard. You cannot just go and run unless you're a natural, then you can just go and run a mile. And then there is the ache and there is this fatigue and everything. Yeah. I'm glad that you found this as a meditation, because it is the same for me too. We all have issues and trauma from the past. So it is my place where I can go and just enjoy myself and be myself and just be happy that I'm running. And I'm glad that it worked out for you really good and you were able to find your space.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. And I try to encourage other people to do the same thing. And sometimes if somebody hasn't, it doesn't even necessarily have to be running. I said it could be any kind of physical activity, but it really is, it's like cleansing for your mind. And if somebody hasn't done that yet, it could be hard to get motivated to do it the first time. But once you start doing it and you get into a cadence where you're doing it regularly, it really is, it's just amazing how it feels.
True. And they said you need 3 weeks to get a routine to dial in. I think that's the gold standard is 3 weeks of training or whatever you need. And he said it doesn't have to be running. You can do walking, you can do Zumba or whatever you like. It just go play basketball, play football or anything. Right. And I also try to encourage people to do this. And one of the reasons I started this podcast was if somebody's listening out story, right? Somebody might resonate to what you are saying, how it is hard in the early on and starting out of breath and all this kind of thing, because that happens to everybody who is starting. That happened to me too, because I hated running when I was growing up and I didn't like it. But now we are addicted to it. So goal is to get at least somebody listening to it and then get them hooked up, or at least less up and then try to run. So that is the goal. And I hope that with all the stories that people are sharing in the podcast, I think at least few people would just go and enjoy running and see how it feels, and then hopefully they can enjoy it from there.
Yeah. Definitely.
And also, you lost your mom when you were really young, in early 20s, and that's really tough because I am 41 and I cannot imagine now if that happened, then I don't know how would I react. So in that particular moment, how did running help you to overcome this grief and loss?
Yeah, it actually is kind of almost the continuation of what we were just talking about, because when I started running, it was maybe a couple of years before my mom passed away. And over that time, I was slowly getting able to get to a point where I could do longer distances. And I was just about to start training for my first half marathon. My mom passed away. And it was a really rough time. I actually stopped running for a few months because, well, my parents, first of all, weren't together. I found out when I was 19 that my dad had passed away, and I never really knew him, but I also don't have any brothers or sisters. So my mom passed away. It just left me, and I had to go through her house and clean up all of her things and then try to sell her house. And then also my daughter had just been born a couple months earlier. So it was this just crazy mix of emotions, and running was just not something that I could really focus on. Although the funny thing is it would have helped me probably clear my head the same way we were just talking about. But at the time I was just like, I just don't have time to think about this. And I don't have time to train for a race. I don't have time. I kind of took a break from running. And then I got to a point a few months later where my head was starting to clear a little bit. And something that occurred to me was knowing my mom, she would not have wanted me to give up on one of my goals because of her. And at this point, the race that I was planning to train for had already passed, but I made a promise to myself that I was going to do that same race the next year. And I did. So I got back into training, started running again. It was at the time, it was a Rock and Roll Nashville half marathon. And I did that. And right before I did the race, I kind of stood there at the starting line and I kind of looked up and I was like, all right, Mom, this is for you. Started doing the race, crossed the finish line, and it felt amazing. And actually, the interesting thing is when you lose a parent, it takes a long time to get over the loss. And crossing the finish line was, I still remember to this day, that was the first time in over a year that I actually felt normal again. I felt really good and I didn't feel bad about the fact that I felt good. I know that my mom would have been right there with me, would have loved it. It was just something that kind of, at that point, encouraged me to keep going and doing even more. So.
Definitely. I think she would have want you to continue and just go and do things you love, because that's what parents would want. And you have been through so many things. Yeah. And if it was any other people in your position, that they would probably freeze. They didn't know what to do. But you didn't freeze. You just kept moving and you kept your head down. And what was the reason, or what made you go through it?
And I'll tell you, I wish I had a specific answer for this. I think part of it is when I was growing up and I went through some really hard times, I was lucky enough that I did have some people around me who kind of encouraged me to stay positive, and that I kind of carried with that all the way through my adulthood. But I know there's got to be more to it than that. I don't specifically know what it is, but I actually do try to encourage other people. And one of the things that I try to do with my own stories is I try to be as open as possible to inspire other people that are maybe going through something like what I am going through or what I used to go through, and just kind of show them that it doesn't always have to be like that if you're willing to just keep moving forward. But I really wish I had better insights into what it was that made me not stop, because to be honest with you, there are some times where I've gone through stressful times in my life for various reasons where I've wanted to just throw my hands up in the air and say, this is enough. In the back of my mind somewhere that won't let me do that. I wish I could share exactly what that is with other people, but I'm not exactly sure what it is other than just the encouragement and trying to keep it being encouraging and inspirational to other people.
Maybe they're more resilient and you're more strong. And so that's how you kept going and did go through. And you mentioned earlier on that you have run half marathon and full marathons in every state in the US and every continent, including in Antarctica. Out of all of these races they have done in everywhere in US, which one cracked you wide up, physically or emotionally?
I can tell you, physically, there was a race in Aspen, Colorado called the Golden Leaf Half Marathon. And I will tell you this, it's only a half marathon, but it was harder than any full marathon I've ever run because, well, the elevation, it's on top of a mountain. It's 13,000 feet. It was also a single track trail run that was super technical. So there's like tree roots and streams and rocks on the trail. There's only enough room for one person. And there's a few times where you're running on like next to a cliff where it's literally, if I trip, I'm going to fall off the side of this mountain and there's no railing or anything. And the race starts out going uphill at an 11% grade. You're literally standing at the line because you just start running up and the air is so much thinner because it's at altitude. You get up for about a mile and a half and it kind of levels off, but then it goes uphill again and then it levels off and it goes all the way up to 7.5 miles because you run actually over the top of a mountain. But about mile 7.5, you finally hit the top and then it starts going down. Down isn't necessarily easier than up in some way because it's pounding your legs and your knees and going down at such a steep angle that I actually at that point, it was away from the cliffs and everything. You're more in the middle, but there was some grass on the side of the trail. And I saw a few people where I had to stop and make sure they were okay because they had fallen and they're sitting on the side of the course and their knees were bloody. And I'm like, are you sure you're okay? And they're, yeah, just go ahead. And I'm like, okay. And you get to about mile, maybe 11.5, and then it finally levels off and go run through downtown Aspen, and the actual finish line is in downtown Aspen. But when the course finally levels off and gets flat, you're so beat up that you don't even care anymore. You're like, I just want to be done with this. It's brutal. But the thing about that is, number one, it's cool to say that I did something like that, and it's a cool story, even though it was hard at the time, and I probably wouldn't do that race again. I got a good story out of it, and also the scenery was beautiful. When you're running on the side of a mountain, it's right during the middle of September when all the leaves are changing and you can see the other mountains in
Yeah.
the distance and they're like this gold color. It's beautiful scenery, but be prepared to pay the price physically to get to those views.
Yeah, I cannot imagine. People think it's easy to go downhill, but that's when you most like to get injured because you think it's downhill and you want to go faster, but then your ITB start being wanked up because you are trying to overpropionate and then you're trying to overstride, and that's where most of the injury happens. That sounds brutal because going up 7.5 miles and coming down, it's not fun. It definitely doesn't sound fun.
The other thing the advice I try to give people too about downhill running in particular is this is one of the reasons why it's important to do really good leg workouts as a runner. And a lot of runners think that, well, because I'm running every day, when I go to the gym, I'm just going to focus on my upper body and I don't need to do like leg presses and workouts like that. And it's like, well, actually the thing is you build up your quads enough, those are going to act like your shock absorbers when you're running down a hill. And it is going to dampen some of the stress that you're putting on your knees when you're going downhill, especially if you're doing really hilly courses. It's important to remember to get in the gym and do those leg days too.
Definitely. I registered for my first ultra right now. Every weekend, it's around 200-meter elevation, and I'm trying to strengthen. I found out that one of my leg was screwed up because it's weaker than the other one. That's why I've been having injuries on that one. I always had issues when I was doing the marathon and stuff like that. So now I'm paying more attention, and whenever I'm doing workout, then I try to do more rep on my left leg than on the right one, just to make sure that it gets stronger, faster. Leg workout are important, especially your hips and glutes, I think, because if those are weaker, then your knees starts hurting, your quad, your ITB, your calf, like everything is tied up to your glutes. And that was one of the things I learned with injuries, that if I go back and look at what injuries I had, then I think I have to just look at which one I don't have so that it's easier to figure out what I don't have.
Yeah. Which ultra are you training for?
There is Mount Fosha. It's near Clone. It's 950 elevation. I didn't know. I thought it was 650, but now I'm doing more research and the elevation 300 meter went up. I'm just like, oh God, it's going to be fun. But I'm trying. Doing tomorrow is my hill workout. Now I am running without looking at my watch or pace, anything, because on the hills I kind of stay in my power zone, so I have to walk so that I don't exceed. I'm just having fun right now and enjoying it more than just being in this pursuit of time with the road races. I'm happy right now.
That's what I do now too, as far as running, is I don't really look at my watch or keep track of my pace as much because, well, for a couple of reasons. First, there was a time when I was in like my late 20s when I could run a marathon in like 3.5 hours. And now that I'm older than that, there's no way I'm going to hit those, like the PRs that I used to be able to get when I was that young ever again. I got to a point where I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense to just give up running. I love running. What can I do instead? And I started thinking of it more as like a journey. And that's why I'm kind of traveling to these places and just trying to enjoy feeling of running. Still, obviously, I want to do good and get a decent time, but I'm not really that worried. I'm not looking at my split times every mile or anything like I used to. And it's just a lot of fun to get out and enjoy running.
It becomes more meaningful and enjoys if you don't just look at the time. And I think being a road runner for so long, all the races I've done before this ultra, it's just been all road runs, and I've always been in the pack where I wanted to run faster. Every marathon I ran, I wanted to go faster. It was always about getting the time and not about having fun. And we always forget that the reason we started running is to have fun. If we start just going after this time, PB, it doesn't matter, because who cares about PB? Some people care, but now I don't care because I just want to enjoy it. And I don't want to stop running, like you said, because it's one of the things I love to, and it's one of my passion too, to run. Now my goal is to just enjoy and do more ultras where I don't have to fight against myself, try to get faster, and rather than just enjoy the journey, the people. And I also found out that trail community is much more cooler than and hip than the road running community too.
See that.
I've had so many trail runners here in podcast, and they are cool, and the way they talk and everything, and it's just infectious, I think, and you get more addicted to it. And then I was watching the Coco. I don't know if you saw Andrew Glaze.
Yeah.
He ran it 250 miles in 102 hours or something, but he was posting it every day. And I was just, wow, people are doing these crazy things. And I was looking for my next 100K. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Right. They are doing 250 miles. I can at least do 100K. It's inspiring all the community and people. And it's amazing how people just go and do this incredible thing, which we all think is impossible. And he did it 5 times. It's outrageous. I don't know how. He doesn't even have any toenails. Insane.
That's crazy. Wow.
Of all the places you have run, which race reminded you why you started running in the first place?
Yeah, interesting story, because because I've run in some pretty exotic places, but the race that reminded me of why I started running in the first place was actually last year's Los Angeles Marathon in 2024. And I have to give you a little bit of it. In 2022 was when I did Antarctica. After that, I kind of had this idea for what I wanted to do next, which was what I'm working on now, which places in the State Department's travel advisory list. But 2023, I got diagnosed with a couple health issues and had to stop running for a little while. I actually had 2 eye surgeries, in fact. For a lot of 2023, I think I'd done some running in the beginning of the year, didn't really do much else through the middle of the year. And then my friend Bella, who you actually have talked to on one of your podcasts, asked me if I wanted to sign up for the LA Marathon with her. At that point, I wasn't sure that I was ever going to run another marathon again. At first, I was like, let me see. And then I signed up because I was like, yeah, maybe this will be fun. Because I hadn't run in a while, I had to take some time off. I had no choice but to kind of go back to basics with training. I started training for this race. I had never done a marathon before, and I was training from scratch for the first time. The first marathon I had ever run was the 2006 Chicago Marathon, like the first full marathon. Now it's almost 20 years later. I'm going to actually follow a similar training program. I pulled out my old Hal Higdon training plans and started training, and I loved it. I forgot how good this feels. I don't know what my time is going to be. I'm just going to have fun. We kind of trained together remotely because I'm in Chicago and she's in Los Angeles, but we would keep each other updated about how our training was going. And then on the day of the race, we ran almost the entire course together and crossed the finish line together. And it was just literally the question you just asked. When I crossed the finish, I was like, this is why I love running. And it felt good. And then since then, I've done several other races over the last year or so, and I couldn't be more happy.
It is fun, right? When you cross the line and the process you go through when you train and everything, it's just so good because you put in so much time and effort, and then at that moment, like last 100 meters, you cross it and everybody's cheering and the cameramen are taking pictures, and it's just like a nice feeling when you cross that line. It's just like amazing moment. Yeah. So now if I ask you to pick one race to do, not for the medals or for the, but for the feeling, like how you felt, like just now you talk about the LA Marathon and how you felt. So which race would it be if I ask you like just to go and pick one right now?
Antarctica, almost no doubt. The interesting thing about Antarctica is it's a trail run because there's no paved roads in Antarctica. So it's that different vibe, like how we were talking about trail runs have their own different vibe than a road run. But it's also the process to get there is so arduous. From the US, basically, you fly to Buenos Aires in Argentina, and then you fly from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia, which is like all the way at the bottom tip of South America. And then you take a boat for 48 hours and you cross, it's called the Drake Passage, which is one of the roughest stretches of sea in the world because it's where all the different oceans come together kind of at the bottom of the world. And because all the oceans are different temperatures, it stirs up the water and there's no landmass to stop the waves. So we were having like 12-meter swells. At one point I got thrown out of my bed. It was like this crazy, but then when you get there in this place that is like nothing else you've ever seen anywhere in the world, because there's no people there other than there's a handful of scientific research centers, but nobody actually lives there. Still sleep on the boat because it's not like there's any hotels or anything. And you're surrounded by whales and dolphins and penguins and seals, all this wildlife that for the most part doesn't have any reason to really be afraid of people because you don't encounter that many people. You're going out and besides the race, I did a bunch of hikes and excursions and everything, but the race itself is you run on, there's all these scientific research bases that are run by all these different countries. There are a bunch of trails and dirt roads and things that connect those bases together because sometimes the scientists have to go back and forth if they're working on a project together or whatever. And that's what you run on. So you're running through all these different bases. The scientists actually come out and cheer for you, and they're kind of your spectators because they're not even used to seeing anybody other than their own colleague. They'll go there for months at a time. It's just I've never had any kind of experience like that anywhere else. And I've run in some pretty exotic places, but that was just such a cool experience. You get to kind of get a picture of what the world would look really truly untouched by people too in certain places.
That journey sounds scary already because you go to Argentina and then the sea. Wow, I'm scared of water. I don't think I'm going there because I don't think I can make it to the water. It's one of the most dangerous things for me. I've done cruises and stuff, but he said the 12 foot, no, thank you very much. That is not for me. But that really sounds incredible though, how you described. And he said there is not a lot of people. And how did you feel when you were running in? And how was environment? And just, can you give us a glimpse of how it was and how you felt when you ran? Was it probably ice? That'd be a stupid question, but how was everything during that race?
It wasn't terrible. Like the roads were mostly clear and the trails and everything were mostly clear because the time of year that you go it's technically summer in the southern hemisphere. You go in like February, March time frame. But summer also means a high of 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is -2 or so. Still cold, but you put on a couple layers and it's good. And it's almost the entire journey feels really, you're kind of isolated because you're on this boat. There's also an international law that says that unless you actually have a scientific research permit, there can't be more than 100 people that are on any one landing at any time. There are 200 people that go down for the race, and they do it in 2 waves. The earlier wave, I was in the first wave where I started at 6 a.m. Everybody from that wave has to be back, not only done running, but back on the boat by noon. The second wave can go out and then they run in the afternoon. You're basically doing this race with only 100 other people, and then there's like a handful of scientists coming out. And the rest of it it's almost like the Zen feeling because you're out running by yourself in the middle of this like landscape that looks like you're on an alien world almost. And every now and then you'll see somebody. And there were a couple penguins that actually walked up to the finish line. Everyone took their gear or whatever they wanted to change into after the race because it is cold and you want to get into some warm clothes pretty quickly. And we had all of our bags kind of piled up by the finish line. There were a couple penguins that came to check out the bags and everything. And we've got some pretty good pictures of them. It's an interesting experience. You're not really thinking about your time as much as believe I'm running in a place like this. That in my case, when I think about the way that I grew up, it was actually something that crossed my mind while I was doing the race. I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old. If somebody would have told me that one day you're going to be running I never would have believed it. And it was really cool. And then the other thing that is interesting about that is because only 200 people on the entire boat on the way down, they're all runners or almost all runners. A couple people maybe brought a significant other with them to be there to support them. But for the most part, because it's so complicated to get down there and everything, a lot of people just went solo, and then you get to meet all these other runners. And I have some friends that I met on that boat that I am still friends with even now. It's because you all got together and did this unique thing that most people don't get to do. It creates an interesting bond for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds exotic. Like how you describe and everything, it sounds wow. That must have been really incredible. Now, from Antarctica, you are now taking it further and you are running in the country that are flagged by the US State Department as risky. What flip the switch on this, and what are you actually chasing for all these kind of things?
The interesting thing is it's kind of evolved over the years, the reason why I wanted to do this. I've been thinking about doing this for several years, I'll tell you. But in 2010, I did my first international race, which was the Mount Kilimanjaro Marathon in Tanzania in Africa. And Tanzania is not on the US State Department. It's not considered to be a dangerous country or anything. But the one thing that I noticed when I was getting ready to go there was whenever I would tell any of my friends from the United States, they'd be like, oh my God, you're running in Africa? Isn't that dangerous? Are you sure you're going to be okay if you go there? And everybody thought that either I was going to get attacked by a lion or some locals were going to kidnap me. And then I got to a point where I had never been to Africa either. I'd maybe been to Europe or a couple places that are, not that much different than the US. But this was my first time going to Africa. And I started to second guess myself and think, man, well, should I be doing this? What if something does happen? But I went through with it anyway. And I'm like, nothing happened. Like none of the things that anybody was worried about happened. Everything was great. In fact, that was the first time I went and did an international race and met a friend of mine. There was a guy named Nelson who he actually came in second place in the race and ran the entire course barefoot. Yeah. Wow. And one of the things that he did that because at the time he didn't have shoes. The way that we got to be friends was that we just started chatting with each other after the race. And because we both won awards, came in second place in the race, my half marathon split time was high enough that I ended up getting a medal for that. When we were talking, we realized he spoke really broken English and I don't really speak Swahili well, but we knew enough words that we could get along with each other. We kind of realized that we had the same size feet. I gave him an extra pair of shoes that I had. We exchanged email addresses, and over the years, we've still been in touch. Now he's gone on to compete in a bunch of international marathons. He's gotten invited to the majors and things. I actually will send him things sometimes. He's now a running coach, and he's a good friend. That was one of the things that kind of motivated me. I'm thinking everybody was afraid of telling me that I should be afraid to go to Africa. I went to Africa. It was totally fine. What about all these these other places. There's got to be other places that are quote unquote dangerous that turn out not to be dangerous. I started looking for other places to go. And I think my original theory that I wanted to prove out was all these places that we think are dangerous are not really as dangerous as we think they are, which is, I would say, kind of true, but also not exactly true. And I think I don't want to give the wrong impression, because there actually are some places I've been to that I wouldn't recommend people going to. But one thing that I have had in common is almost every trip I've met friends. And that's where I started to have the idea of, okay, it's not that the places are not, like, there are places you have to be careful when you travel to and everything. But like I said, the one thing that I realize is anywhere in the world that I go, I can meet somebody, be friends with somebody, and get to a point where if I ever go back to that place, I know somebody there who would want to at least meet me and have a cup of coffee or meet up for dinner or something. And I think that's what I'm trying to prove, is that anybody in the world can be friends regardless of any differences that we have. And I've got plenty of other great, I met a couple of my friends in Brazil that own a travel agency, and they're actually the ones that they've been helping me with a lot of my international travel now. And met some friends while I was in places like Havana, Cuba, and Jerusalem that I can go into a ton of stories, but it's just been amazing. And that's what I'm ultimately going to be writing about in the book, is just that human connection that we can all make.
Yeah, like you said, people just have this misconception. I'm sure there are places that are really dangerous that we shouldn't go, but sometimes if somebody says Africa, then there's this idea or this cloud over it that it's bad and it's not good and people are not civil and whatever. Then people don't want to experience all this and they miss out on it because they are scared to go. You were second doubting yourself too, but you went and you had a great time and you made friends, and that's fun. A lot of people miss out on that because of this fear, which is just nonsense sometimes because we just don't want to do it.
Exactly.
And things like that. Yeah, I'm glad that you are doing this and you are raising this awareness that there are nice people, because at the end it is what it is. And we being runners, I think, have most thing in common than most other people, because it's easier to make friends than most people. So I think that is one of the reasons. And during all of these travels that you did to the places that you went, can you please give us one eye-catching conversation that you had with a local runner?
Yeah.
One of those areas?
Let's see. They're probably one of the most eye-opening conversations that I've had with a local. Actually, well, here's the interesting story. This wasn't necessarily with a runner, but it was kind of adjacent to this. When my daughter Sarah was 11, she and I ran a 5K together, and then we published a book together. We wrote together about running with kids and how to make running enjoyable for kids. I promoted it on my Instagram page, and then a friend, her name is Nuna, reached out to me. She's from Iran. She wanted to know if it was okay if she translated my book into Farsi and shared it with some people in Iran. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And she's like, I can't send you any money for it because the way our government, the US and government of Iran are not, that would not go over very well. I was like, look, honestly, I don't care. I don't want any money. I think the idea that you would be willing to do something like that is really cool. And when we started talking, one of the reasons that I realized that she wanted to do that was because there are a lot of people in Iran who have the same goals for their families. They want their kids to be happy. They find fun activities to do with their kids, and they want to generally enjoy their lives. And that's another thing that kind of led to my theory of deep down inside, we all have a lot more in common than what we realize. And it's another example of someone that I've gotten to be friends with over the years. And we've never, unfortunately, been able to meet in person because of all the travel restrictions and everything. But at some point, I'm hoping that we will, and we'll have an opportunity to actually get together and hang out. And hopefully, we'll see. It's politics. And so
that's like one tough place. I don't know if the diplomacy would change.
It's hard to even enter the country with an American passport. And we've talked about that sometimes. I would love to do it, but it is just, there's other reasons that are difficult besides just because dangerous. Like, it's physically, legally, it's not even possible to go there right now. But you never know. Things are always changing. And I said, our governments don't get along, but the people are amazing at an individual level.
And also, you talked about the places where the State Department flagged as unsafe, but have you ever felt unsafe, like truly unsafe? And in those situations, what made you keep?
Yeah, I can give you a couple examples. And the thing is, I don't want to mention the specific places because I also don't want to tarnish any reputations, because the other thing is, these are all isolated incidents, and I really actually enjoyed the overall trips. But one place in particular, it was a place where there's different ethnic groups that have a lot of tension with each other. And one of my running friends and I were walking through one of the sections of the city. A little kid who was maybe 6 or 7 years old pointed it was a toy AK-47, but it was very real looking. Pointed at my friend, pulled the trigger, pointed at me, pulled the trigger. I felt like a blast of air. And then he kind of gave this, looked at us with this grin of yeah, I would have got you. It wasn't a cute little, I'm a little kid playing with my toy grin. It was if this was real, I would have got you. And his parents were sitting maybe 5 feet, a couple meters away, didn't say anything. And it was an unnerving experience. Number one, because it was such a young kid. His parents didn't say anything. And because it all happened so fast that I realized, actually, he wasn't wrong. He would have got us if he had a real gun. And I wouldn't have even had time to react because I didn't even understand what was happening until it was too late. And we kept walking and talked a little bit about what's going on in that region and everything. And different people feel the way that they do. But I said, I don't want to tarnish the reputation of the place that I was when that happened, because every other part of that trip was just an amazing experience. That was an isolated incident, but it does kind of show how much tension there is in certain places. Also, in another country, I was on the way getting a ride from the airport to my hotel room, and traffic was moving a little slow. And then I realized that it was because there was a dead body in the middle of the street and cars were driving around. It was more of an annoyance than anything. And that was I was like, wow, I've never seen something like that. And then I think the third one was a country in Southeast Asia where it has more to do with how laws are different in different parts of the world, where I happened to be walking down the street past this nightclub. It was just a coincidence that I wasn't going in or anything. I was just walking past, but I see these security guards bringing this guy out that they had just beaten into a bloody mess, because I don't know what he did inside the bar, but he did something that made somebody upset. They just dragged him out and kind of tossed him on the sidewalk. And right across from the nightclub was a police station, and there were police officers standing out there watching it and didn't do anything. And I'm thinking, what it made me realize is you have to be cognizant also of the laws in different cities, and you could end up in a really rough situation if you're doing something that might be perfectly okay in a different country, but yet you do have to be really respectful of local cultures and things too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And in some places don't, especially South America, they'll just walk, they'll just okay, keep going on. And when you are traveling to these such places which are technically quote unquote are advised to travel, what's your gut check when you are doing this?
It's difficult because each place is a little bit different. But one of the things that I always try to do ahead of time is research the local culture as much as I can, learn as much as I can about how to dress, how to act, try to learn local phrases. And really the thing is that don't be the ugly American that stands out when you go places, that's loud and the stereotypical way that people outside of the US think of Americans, and just try to be respectful. And with that, it's interesting because most of the incidents that I mentioned earlier, the thing with the nightclub, that didn't have anything to do with me. I just happened to be walking by when it happened. I've really never had that many big problems with people because I am respectful, and because people can kind of sense when is genuinely curious and wants to learn more about their culture and about them. And that's where people open up a little bit more too.
And also you are trying to prove that real connections cuts through the politics, borders, and all those bullshits that's happened in different places. Has there been any moment that made you believe that whatever you are doing is working?
I have a friend, Nick is his name. He grew up in Jerusalem, and I actually just did a race in Jerusalem. And when he found out I was going to be doing that, he introduced me to some friends. Shmuel is one of his friends who's a travel guide who gives running tours of Jerusalem. He actually might be a good person for you to talk to on a future podcast. And then Shmuel helped me see some of the parts of the city where they're doing digs that the public doesn't easily have access to. A good example is when I was in Havana, Cuba, I went to go see a performance. There's a dance company out there called Habana Compass that they're well known throughout the country of Cuba. And I saw the performance. I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of the dancers. I can give a shout out to Juliet, Laura, and Dallas Litas. They're people that I became friends with that actually were able to share some information about just Cuban culture with me. And even after I got back home, we follow each other on Instagram, and they'll tell me about different places that they go to perform and different things that they're doing. And it's just been amazing that a lot of these friendships that I've made, where maybe I just had one or two quick interactions with somebody while I was in a country, the friendships kept going long afterwards. And then the interesting thing, my friend Brianna that I met while I was on my trip to Antarctica, we've stayed in touch. She's American, but she runs her own business, and she's got some pretty interesting stories too, because she is a type 1 diabetic, and she's one of the first people to run a marathon on every continent as a diabetic. I've heard other people with interesting stories, and like I said, these are all people that I stay in touch with now. It's just amazing to keep up with what everyone is doing.
Like you said, you went to so many places and you have run practically everywhere, right? So there are different people from around the world, and when you are running running with different people in the same course, what do you talk about like when you're running?
This is actually one of the funniest things. You talk about a lot of the same things any runner would talk about. If you're talking to somebody at the start line, and this has been a lot of specific friends that I've met, but there's also just random conversations I've had with people while you're waiting for the race to start or whatever. And it's always, how did your training go? Have you done this race before? What's the course like? Are there going to be a lot of hills? Is there anything I should be looking out for? And it's a lot of the same conversation. That's one of the things, like running is kind of a universal language, I think, where you can talk to any other runner from anywhere in the world and you'll have a good conversation if you're also a runner.
Yeah, and it's the same words, like it's the same language, even though we may not understand like everything, but the running language is same. I think it's easier to communicate as well, and it's easier to express too. I think that's probably one of the reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
When you ran into all these places that were called scary, what have you been most surprised of from this visit?
How nice everybody is in general. First of all, they're not as scary. And like I said, there are places that you definitely need to be careful and watch yourself, but it's never the same as the way it's portrayed in the media. Even if it's a little bit scary, it's not like this awful place that people usually picture. But then just in general, everybody I've met anywhere in the world has this level of generosity that you don't even necessarily realize are going to have until you have a chance to really go and talk to them.
And you have written 5 books. So when you sit down to write any book, who are you writing it?
The first book I wrote was actually for myself because I just wanted to, I thought it'd be cool to say that I was an author. But as times have, there's a few things that I have kind of realized. One is that when my mom passed away, I was so young, and I've also lost a lot of my other, so I had a cousin who died from suicide when I was a teenager. I had an aunt who died from a drug overdose. I had a friend also who died from suicide when I was young. And I kind of lost all of these people that were really important to me in my life. I was really young, and it made me realize that we all have a limited amount of time to be on this earth. And one of the things that I really, even to this day, so my mom has been gone for 20 years, and I would still give anything able to sit down and have a conversation with her about her life. And there's some things that I wish I knew more about when she was younger that I would love to talk about with her. And there's no way I'm going to ever find out any of those things now. And I started thinking about my daughter, Sarah, and maybe one day when I'm not here, she's going to want to know some things about my life that she never knew. And it's going to be something nice, like even if nobody buys my books, if it's something that I have to pass on to her, I think it'd be great. But the other thing is try to weave some of my own personal stories about my past into what I'm writing about in my books about running as well, because I also hope that anybody that does decide that they're worth picking up and reading is going to feel inspired. And I hope that if there is somebody that maybe they're going through a rough time in their life right now, they can see that, look, I know what you're going through. I've been there, and it doesn't have to always be like that. I promise it won't always be the same. You just have to keep believing and keep trying to move forward. And I hope that anybody in my audience would kind of fit that set as well.
Yeah, I think the goal is the same, right? Just to have somebody get inspired and do things that they are scared of doing, whether it is running or whether it is going to the places that are scary and people don't travel to. Has there been any story that haunts you that you haven't figured out how to do justice yet?
Yeah. In fact, it's the most recent international race I did, which was Jerusalem. Usually after every race, I'll write a blog post and publish it about what I did, who I met, and kind of the story. And eventually those blog posts are going to become chapters in my book. I did Jerusalem about a month ago. I still haven't published the blog post yet. And I've got an outline of it. I've got some of the things written down. But the challenge is that there's so much going on right now, and there's so many different points of view with the situation there between like the Israelis, the Palestinians, some people who just want peace. And I had an opportunity to talk to people on all different sides of that conflict. I just want to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting anybody's viewpoints and that I'm giving everybody equal amount of time to, I don't want to come across as biased. That's one of the things that it's taking me a little bit longer to make sure that I'm wording everything just right so that I'm not coming across as that I'm for one side or another. And it really is just a story about here's what I experienced, here's who I met, and here's what the race was like. So.
Yeah, sometimes that stuff try to be in the middle and not to just be a neutral and share a story, because people always try to find things to get mad at you for some reason. It's hard to have that balance sometimes.
And I feel like in my case, I definitely learned a lot while I was there, and I know way more than I ever knew before I had a chance to go there and see things for myself. But I learned also still just scratches the surface of like some of these conflicts that have been going on for literally thousands of years. You can't figure that out in like a 1 week trip. I want to make sure that that's clear to anybody that reads anything that I write too.
Yeah, definitely. And also, what does your next book that has to say that your last five books didn't have already said yet?
Yeah, I think the book that Sarah and I wrote together is probably an exception because that was about a specific topic of her and I running together when she was younger. But most of my other books, that's the other four actually, all have been basically like travel guides for runners where they were, here's the best races to do in this particular region. Here's what to look for while you're there. And if there's a good place to eat that's after the race or whatever. And good information for people that like to run and travel. But this is going to be the first book that has that element of like, here's the human connection that I've made. I think it's going to be a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and I think we are in this period in the world where we don't have that more often because we all live in this cloud being scared or whatever. We don't try to go and find out and try to learn about different things. I think this is probably one of the things we all need to do as a human, where we just go and share and learn about other culture, other things, and just try to be aware of everything's happening. Whenever I go visit cities and everything, then I try to also run there and I also try to see and go find out about the history and everything too, about the people. And I think we all need to do that because otherwise it's just going to be so one-minded. People don't want to explore, people don't want to know about other people, and we always seem to have this conservative mind that people are bad, and when you ask them why they are bad, then they just say they heard it from somebody, but they don't want to go and experience it themselves. Hopefully this will open up new mind for other people where they're more open to go and explore all this kind of thing.
Exactly. And you also, when you explore like a city or like any location as a runner, you see it in a different way than you would if you were just kind of driving through it or whatever too. Like you have more time to see things more up close and see more details, I think, than you would if you just got in a car and drove around the city or went on a tour or something. You're going to see the tours are bad, but you're going to usually get like a high level surface view of whatever the tour guide wants you to see versus going out and exploring on your own and being able to really learn things for yourself.
Also, you see it faster too.
Yeah.
When there is nobody around, I went to Prague and I ran early morning and literally there was nobody there. So all the places, very less people, everything is to yourself and you can enjoy it more, take pictures or whatever you want to do, take video. And it's nicer too because we used to, like all the runners, like being this like creature of habit, we wake up so early to run. I think it works to benefit too.
Yeah, definitely.
Talking about your life and your training, you're just not like prepping cities or anything. You're going where there are no sidewalks, no aid station, maybe no water and every kind of thing. So how does your training changes when you're heading to all these places that are unknown?
Yeah, one of the things is making sure that you've got the right amount of gear to bring with you during the race. And some of the things people don't always think about too is, I've run in countries where you shouldn't drink the water if you're not a local because it'll have different kind of bacteria in it that your body isn't used to. Like for locals, it's fine, but for you, it is. And is there any way that you can get water that is okay to drink that you can then bring with you while you're running? That's important. And then, like you said, some places don't really have the aid stations, so I'll make sure I've got everything with me that I can, and then kind of balance out the weight ratios and everything. And then I think after a while, you kind of get used to that because it's similar to a lot of the trail runs and ultramarathons that you do, where there's not really, when you do a marathon and then every couple miles there's like a big table with water all. When you're doing a 100K ultramarathon through the forest somewhere, that you're not going to have that, right? So it's kind of the same concept of just understanding ahead of time, what is the terrain going to be like, what is the temperature going to be like, is there going to be shade, is there not going to be shade, and what resources are going to be available to me, and then planning accordingly, I think, is what it is.
And you said earlier that from the LA Marathon, you got this joy of running again, and when you finished the line and you started to fall in love. So at this moment, you are doing 30 to 60 miles a week.
Yeah.
And where is this motivation coming from right now?
Part of it is actually it's kind of the Zen thing that we talked about earlier, where it helps me just clear my head in general. A lot of times just waking up in the morning, going for a run, it's become a natural part of how I just start my day. And then the other part I would say is that a lot of times it's funny because even though there's not a finish line in sight, in the sense that I'm not doing a race every day, I still know that I'm working towards something, because a lot of times, even if the race is 3 months out, I know that I still have to keep that base level of fitness to be able to perform well in the race. So I'll keep doing that. And then when it's time to start ramping up my mileage, I'm ready to start training for whatever specific distance. I want to be strong enough to be able to do that. I kind of remind myself about those things as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's imagine that a kid is listening to right now who is homeless and lost and who feels there seems to be no way out. What would be your one advice to him right now?
I think there's honestly two parts to that question. If somebody is genuinely homeless, there's the more practical, let's make sure you have a place to live and food to eat and have all your basic needs met. And then from there, let's talk about how we can get you to a point in your life where you don't have to worry about ever being homeless anymore. One of the reasons why I would encourage somebody to start running once you're in a place where you feel stability and safe and everything, after you run and you start to realize what you're capable of doing and what your body is capable of, it actually gives you this kind of natural level of confidence that you didn't have before. And you start to believe in yourself. And that kind of bleeds into other parts of your life too, right? Where, okay, I never thought I could run 10 miles and now I worked up to it and I did. Now I never thought that I'd be able to go for a job interview at this place that I never thought that I'd be able to get a job. Maybe I can do that because I've just shown myself that I'm capable of doing things that I never thought I could do. And that would kind of be the ultimate goal is, number one, let's get you safe. Let's find you a place to live. Let's find you make sure that you've got food and everything. And then let's start focusing on how you can move forward from there.
And finally, after all the places, like all the pains and all the payment, what's the most human moment that you have experienced while running?
For 10 years, I haven't done this in a while, but I still have some friends that do it. But maybe the first 10 years after I started running marathons, there's this 150-mile relay that I do or was doing from Chicago to Peoria. And in Peoria, Illinois is where there's a big satellite hospital for St. Jude Children's Hospital. And the race, it's not really a race. You do it with a team of about 10 people. The whole point of it is to raise money for St. Jude, because if you don't know about St. Jude, it's a hospital that treats kids that have cancer. They only charge whatever you can pay. And if you don't have insurance or you don't have money, fine, you don't have to pay. And they do constant fundraising throughout the year to help pay for all the bills. And this relay, it is really grueling. It is through the middle of all these farm fields where there's no trees in sight. And it's always the first weekend in August. So the temperature is brutal. You're running on blacktop. You feel the heat coming up and you're running about 3 to 6 miles at a time. And then when you're not running, you're hanging out with the rest of your team in this RV. And after a couple of days, because it takes about 2 days to do this run, it's just sweaty and gross and it smells and everything. But when you get to the end, you realize why you did it, which is because at the end, there's this telethon that St. Jude has, and the run is part of it. You run in and you present this giant check for all the money that the runners have raised. And the course of 10 years, between me and my team, have helped raise about $3 million for St. Jude by doing this. And you get to meet some of the families, some of the kids that are being treated there. And you realize, like, whatever I just did and however painful and rough it was totally worth it. And I had to pick one specific thing from doing that run for all those years. So at the beginning of the run, when you first start out in Chicago, there's always this kind of kickoff event where we talk about why we run and what to expect over the next couple of days for someone who hasn't done the race. This one year, there was a motivational speaker there to help get everybody pumped about the run. He told this interesting story that has always stayed with me. In fact, I think about this a lot. The story was a man had become super upset and frustrated with all the pain and suffering going on in the world. He looked up at the sky and he cried out to God and said, God, why don't you send somebody to fix all of this? And God replied to him and said, I did send somebody. I sent you. And that's something that stayed with me forever. We all have to do one little piece to make things better. There's not going to be any magic wand that's going to save the world or anything. And that actually is one of the things that's motivated. All of the things that we've talked about with me trying to show connections with other people and traveling to these places and trying to show what they're like and everything. It is basically me trying to do my one little piece, as small as it may be, to kind of show those things and do my part to try and help make the world a better place.
That was powerful. You are the one. That's deep.
Exactly.
That's deep. I think these are all the questions I had for the running, but here's this new fun section. It's a rapid fire. I'll just ask you a bunch of questions and whatever things comes to your head first, okay? You don't have to think. It's going to be easy peasy.
Yeah, okay.
First race you ever ran, what hurt the most?
You know, that's the first race I ever ran. There was nothing specifically that hurt, but I noticed that overall afterwards I was tired because my body felt tired.
Most overrated marathon?
Oh, God, most overrated. That's a tough one because I don't have a good answer for that because there's always things I've liked and disliked about almost every race. And I've done so many of them that it's okay. I'll tell you, I don't think this race is overrated, but the New York Marathon, I loved doing it, but it was the logistics of getting there. You start on Staten Island. I basically had to wake up at about 3:30 in the morning because I was staying at an Airbnb in Queens. I'd take the subway to get to Manhattan so that I could get on a bus so that I could get across the bridge. And I was in the second wave. I basically got there about 7 hours before my start time. And and then I had to run a whole marathon after this. I don't think it's overrated, and I really enjoyed the race, and it was an amazing experience. Just all of the work around logistically and everything. This was cool, but I'm glad that I did it once, and once is good.
Fair enough. Most underrated running city?
Oh, underrated running city. The Anchorage, Alaska. That was really cool to just be able to run out in the woods. I saw a moose with my friend Alfred while I was running it. It's a cool race, and you do it during the Mayor's Midnight Sun Marathon is the name of it, and you run it during summer solstice weekend. There's a lot of that come out after the race. There's a big festival at nighttime because the sun never goes down. You do the race, you go back, you take a nap for a couple hours, and then you go hang out all night, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and it's daylight out. It's a pretty cool experience, and the race is a lot of
I
fun.
think that's one of I wanted to do.
Oh, yeah.
Shoes you swear by. What the shoes that you
Adrenalines.
country that surprised you the most?
Cuba, actually. I had an amazing time and met some amazing people. And we've always learned from growing up in the United States. I don't think this is true for anyone else in the world, but in the US, we've always heard Cuba's a terrible country and you should never go there. And then I went there and it was fun. There was great music. There was good food. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
A country that scared you the most?
That's a difficult one. I don't know that I have a good answer for that one. Well, actually, I will say the country that scared me the most probably was Tanzania before I went, because it was like the story I told you earlier where people were kind of telling me I should be scared. And then when I got there, I was like, this is not scary at all. And after that, I haven't really been afraid of anything as much as just I want to make sure that I know what I'm getting myself into when I go somewhere.
Solo runs or group run?
Depends on the mood. I mostly solo runs, but I also do street art running tours, different neighborhoods around Chicago. Completely different topic, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But those are group runs where I'll show people different murals and talk about some of the local artists, and those are a lot of fun too.
And the last one is one word to describe the high after finishing.
Oh, yeah, just incredible. It's almost like there's no way to really describe it, but you're just on top of the world.
And I think this is it. And I don't have any other questions for you. And this was Tom, and I appreciate you taking your time for this.
I appreciate the offer to be on, and this was a great conversation. And yeah, looking forward to talking to you guys.
Hey everyone, thank you for making it to the end of the podcast. I hope you really enjoy this conversation. I'll see you again next time with another guest. Until then, happy running.